Calochortus. It's a real pleasure to welcome Jeff Bisbee back with us again, who has spoken to us before on Ceanothus. He's a botanist and a very good photographer. And he was raised in Grass Valley. He spent many years documenting the beauty of native plants through photography, and many of his photographs have been published. For example, they appear in conifers around the world. And for that book, he traveled around Mexico to photograph conifers in their native habitat. His photos also appear in the field guide to manzanitas. If you have any interest in manzanitas, I encourage you to get the book. It's the best thing on the subject there is. And since that time, he's moved on to other genus, such as Calochortus, which we're going to hear about tonight, and Fritillaria, Lilium, Erythronium, and his latest interest is Eriogonum. And he enjoys cultivating native plants from seed and has an extensive collection of Mexican and Western conifers on his family property in Colfax, as well as Arctostaphylos and Ceanothus. He's currently living in Gardnerville, Nevada. And Jeff informed me that he is near an area that has had a recent fire, and the power has been unstable from time to time. It's now back, but if for any reason his signal gets dropped, don't go away, that he has the ability to come back in on a hotspot. So we'll hope that that doesn't happen, but I just wanted to prepare you if it does. So Jeff, with great pleasure, I turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you very much for having me. Calochortus is a lot of people's favorite. I've noticed that they're very popular genus, and I first became aware of these when I was about 10 years old, growing up in Grass Valley. I just kind of, must have been about at the end of the school year. I just wandered behind the bus stop there. There's a grassy field, and I saw these amazing flowers that were just different colors of white and lavender and all different shades. And I was like, wow, what are these? And it turns out they were Calochortus superbus. It was actually a very nice population of them, a really variable population of them. And so that kind of sparked my interest from an early age in the genus. I'm going to warn you right now, I'm not an expert on Calochortus. I'm an admirer. I've been able to photograph all the species that are in the United States, except for one variety of Calochortus elegans. I haven't been able to find yet. It's up there in Idaho. I just haven't been there at the right time to photograph that one. But I've photographed all the rest. The ones in Mexico, we're going to talk a little bit about those towards the end. I have not been able to photograph any of those. So when we get to that section there, they're not my photographs. A lot of them are the photographs of Ron Parsons. He's there in the Bay Area, and he's actually has taught me a lot about Calochortus. He's very knowledgeable on the subject. So if you have any questions, make sure they're easy ones, because I probably won't know the answer. Calochortus is part of the lily family, Liliaceae. There's 8 genera in California. Used to be a lot more. Little by little, they've been taking them out. And the photographs on the bottom there, some of those are not my photographs. I haven't seen all of those species, but of course there we go. Lilium is, of course, it's the main one in the lily family in California. Is very well represented. We have about 20 species here in California. Very beautiful flowers, very showy, and it's definitely the center of diversity in the United States, especially northwestern California. And the same is true with Erythronium. There's about 18 species in California, and they range all through the northern hemisphere, and there's several species in the eastern United States, but the main center of diversity is also in California. The one in the lower right there, that was taken in the Pyrenees in Spain, and all throughout Western Europe, they have only one species. It's a very beautiful species, but it's the only one in Western Europe. Fritillaria, there was also about 18 species, and once again, California is the main center for diversity in North America for Fritillaria. There are no species in the eastern United States, but it's interesting that they do go all through the northern hemisphere. In fact, the main center of diversity for Fritillaria is the Eastern Mediterranean. Iran, Iraq, Turkey, that area, there's a lot of very interesting species of Fritillaria there. And also, they do also make it into the Western Mediterranean. The one lower right there was taken in southern Spain. It looks very similar to a lot of the species we have in California. And there's another one that grows in northern Spain in the Pyrenees. Now, before I wanted to mention that Fritillaria, it may not seem so closely related to Calochortus, just looking at it, but there is a close connection there, and you'll see it at towards the end when we get into some of the Mexican species. Then you'll see that the close connection there with Calochortus. Now, of course, the Mariposa lilies are often compared to tulips. Tulip is one of the closely related relatives of Calochortus. These are not my photos. I've never been to Iran or Crete. I wish I could. There's some very, very interesting plants over there, but the main diversity for the tulips is the Eastern Mediterranean. They do extend over to the Western Mediterranean, a couple species, but there's many species in the Eastern Mediterranean. Now, this is to show you where the Calochortus grow. As you can see, they're confined to the Western United States. They do make it into the northern plains there up North and South Dakota, Eastern Montana. You see one dot way out there in Nebraska. That's probably not based on a native plant. It's probably was something planted. I got this off of iNaturalist. And it's interesting also, if you look up into the Pacific Northwest, they completely avoid the wet area there, the Pacific Northwest, but they are well represented in the Eastern Washington, into British Columbia, Eastern Oregon, and Southern Oregon is also very well represented with the Fritillaria. And then notice down in Mexico there that the Calochortus, I'm sorry, they go all the way down into Central America, down into Guatemala, and all the species down there in Mexico are all of the same section of Calochortus, Cyclobothra, as you see there on the right. The right. Now, Calochortus is divided into 3 sections, and each of the 3 sections are divided into 4 subsections, and the 3 sections are pretty much evenly balanced, distributed in the amount of species. You see there, Calochortus has 20, Mariposa 26, and Cyclobothra has 21 species. And we're going to start with the section Calochortus. Now, the section Calochortus, like I mentioned, is divided into 4 subsections: Pucelli, which are the globe lilies, and then you have Eleganti, which are the cat's ears; Nudi, which are the naked star tulips, as they call them. And then you have Nitidi, which is kind of a mixed bag of unusual ones, mostly up in the Pacific Northwest. Now, some of the identifying characters of the section Calochortus are the fruit, for one. As you can see in the photograph there, the fruit they're kind of winged. They call them 3-winged the other sections, they describe the fruit as angled. They're not these really defined flat wings like this section has. And the fruit are usually nodding in this section, but there's a couple species that they're not. But one of the most identifying characters is the leaf. You notice there on the second photograph, they have a persistent basal leaf that is still green while the plant is blooming, and it's a sheath forming. It's like kind of like a blade of grass. It's usually one very large leaf that is very noticeable when the plant is in bloom. The other sections, the leaves tend to be drying out and fading away, pretty much out of the picture by the time the flower blooms. And these this section of Calochortus are mostly in Northern California and the Pacific Northwest. We're going to start with Pucelli, which is very well represented in the Bay Area. There's 5 species in this subsection, and 4 of them are in the Bay Area. The only one that's not is the Southern Sierra globe lily. Calochortus albus is fairly common here in the Bay Area, and as you see on the map there, there's 2 populations, main populations of this species. You have the ones in the Sierra foothills, which they usually refer to as the Sierra foothill form, because it's pretty distinct from the coastal form. You see in these photos, the Sierra Nevada form they're more elongated. The flowers, the sepals are green or yellowish. The ones in the coast, the sepals are reddish or brownish colored, and they tend to be a kind of a fatter flower, like a wider. And then down in San Luis Obispo and Monterey County, you have one variety of albus, which is usually recognized, but it's a very deep red form. That's a very beautiful flower, and it's just in a few scattered populations down there around San Luis Obispo and southern Monterey County. But not everybody really recognizes this as a good variety, because as you can see in the photograph on the right, that was taken at the very best population of rubellus, which is down there close to San Luis Obispo. And as you can see, there's pink and white flowers right there in the same population with these deep red ones. And you can go to other populations around there that are mostly white, but you'll have a few pink ones. And so it's kind of really hard to separate this as a variety. It's really more of just a really deep red color form. This one here, you guys know very well in the Bay Area, very common north of the Bay Area in the wine country. The golden globe lily, sounds like it would be something from Hollywood. And you see there's 2 dots up there by Redding, which I was driving across on Highway 36 a couple years ago, and I see these flowers, and whoa, that looks like a Calochortus amabilis or amabilis, and so I stopped, and sure enough, I didn't realize that there was a little disjunct population up there in the Sacramento Valley. This is a really beautiful one in the Southern Sierras. It's down there in Kings Canyon and kind of east of Visalia and Porterville. It's fairly common down there. You can spot them real easy because of the really bright, hot pink color there. And these ones, they overlap somewhat with albus around Yosemite, and they're fairly closely related, obviously, but they don't. There hasn't been any hybrids between these 2 reported, which is interesting. These are the 2 narrow endemics in this Pucelli subsection, Mount Diablo globe lily, and then you have the one there, the cedars, Calochortus reichii for Roger Reich. And that's a very interesting one. It's a serpentine endemic. It's only in the cedars, and it's also in Austin Creek State Park there. And it's one spot that's kind of hard to get to. But the whole area there, actually the cedars is a very interesting area. It's surrounded by redwood forest, but it's kind of like a serpentine rock, a hot, dry area, surrounded by this cooler redwood forest area. And there's a lot of endemics in there. One of them is Arctostaphylos bakeri sublavis, only found there in those serpentine areas. There's also a buckwheat, Eriogonum cedrorum, I guess is how you pronounce that. It's only found in those serpentine areas there. It's privately owned, and the Roger Reich is one of the owners there, and they're very conscious about protecting it from any harm. And so the only way you can get in there is to get permission from the landowners. But if you want to see Calochortus reichii, you can see it in Austin Creek State Park. It's a little bit hard to get to. If you go up on one of the ridges there's a parking area, and you can look way down, and you can see a little serpentine area with Sargent cypress, and that's where they're at. You have to kind of walk down. I guess there is a trail. I kind of just went cross country straight to it, which turned out to be kind of a mistake, because when I got down there, first of all, I didn't find any flowers in bloom, because this is such a late bloomer. I kind of miscalculated the timing. I was there towards the end of May, and they still hadn't bloomed yet. I found them in bud. You have to go more in June, early to mid-June. But anyway, once I was down there, it's like, okay, I'm ready to go. And then I started looking around, and like, wait a minute, I have no idea which way I came from, which direction I came from. And, it's all redwood, surrounded by redwood forest, so you don't want to get lost in there. And so I kind of like was panicking. I grabbed my phone, I had a map, and I didn't put my glasses on, and so I like touched it, and I accidentally deleted my map before I even had my glasses on. So I just kind of like went up and looked for a clearing that was up high, and so I can kind of get my bearings, and I finally figured out where I came from. But it was interesting, because I was talking to Ron Parsons, and he went down there, and he said the same thing happened to him, that he went down there and he got turned around and almost couldn't figure out which way to get back. So we're going to move on to the second subsection here, eleganti, which are the cat's ears. There's 7 species, and they're mostly found from Northern California up into the Pacific Northwest. We're going to start with Tolmii, which is the most widespread of all the cat's ears. It goes from here in the Bay Area up to almost Portland, and it's pretty variable. Usually they're white. You have some real small forms, and then there's some fairly large forms that are found in certain areas that are like about a foot tall, fairly large flower. The flowers are usually white, but as you can see here in the photographs, they can range from white to pink to deep purple. And it's like I was mentioning, it's really variable, and probably the most distinct form is the one on the lower left, which is the one that's in the Bay Area in San Mateo County. Now, this is a really tiny flower, and you can see the hair is very sparse, very short, and these are growing in pretty dark areas, like over there in San Mateo County. A lot of times they're like under the redwoods. You'll see like a whole bunch of little tiny flowers there. So a lot of people think that this actually is another species. It's not even Tolmii. This is one of the most amazing populations that I've come across. Somebody told me about these. These are south of Eureka in Humboldt County, and the whole population is this deep purple. I've never seen any others like this. And this is growing up at about 2,600 feet, directly above the the ocean, and it's a very cold, windy spot. Every time I've been there, it's just the wind has been blowing like crazy, making it really difficult to take pictures of the flowers. And it's I hear there are a couple other populations with this color, but these are the only ones I've seen. Now, there in Northern California, there's 3 white cat's ears, and it's kind of a little confusing sometimes to identify them. Usually, just by your location, you can pretty much determine which one you're looking at. For instance, if you're in the North Coast Range here, the Bay Area, you know, anywhere pretty much up the North Coast Range, it's most likely Tolmii, unless you're at high altitude. If you're in the Sierra Nevada, then it's Coruleus, and up in Siskiyou County, there, Trinity County, high elevation, and that's where you start getting into a little difficulty identifying them. So I kind of made this little chart here to kind of help you to identify them. One of the main things to look at are the anthers. You notice in the photograph, Tolmii has very small anthers. They're very small. Coruleus are very large in proportion to the flower, and they're oblong, very blunt on the ends. Elegans has anthers that are apiculate. They come to a very long, thin point, as you can see there in the photograph. And another thing to look at is the petals. Tolmii, the hair goes generally all the way to the apex, with the exception of the ones down there in San Mateo County, which have very sparse hair. Coruleus has these ciliate or these fringed margins on the petal, which Tolmii doesn't really have that at all. And elegans also has that to a lesser degree. It has those ciliate margin, their fringed margins. But the elegans generally has very little hair towards the apex of the petal, and the petal is generally more pointed on the end. The only place where you can really kind of run into a little confusion is like up on Mendocino Pass on Forest Road 7. There's a lot of Tolmii on the west side there, but then when you get up to the top there near Plaskett Meadows, you have these little cat's ears up there that some people call them Coruleus, and some people are calling them elegans, because it's kind of not really clear which one it actually is. The anthers, I noticed on those ones there, are very pointed, so that would kind of indicate that they're elegans. And then also, like up around Castle Lake, you got the same thing. It's you have Coruleus is very common up there. Elegans is also up there, and the ones at the higher elevations, sometimes you're not really sure which one you're looking at. The southernmost of the cat's ears is down there. This one, Westonii, which is down there by Shirley Meadows, kind of northeast of Bakersfield. It's not very common. There's only a couple places where you can easily find them, and it's a very interesting little one. It's basically has no stem. The flowers are right on the ground, and they have these interesting brown markings on the inside of the petal, which are very beautiful. And up in the Pacific Northwest, you have 2 species up there. You have they're very similar to each other. Basically, the only difference is the apiculatus, which is up in the northern Rockies, has a black spot at the base of the petal, and then the subalpinus, which is in the Cascades, does not. Other than that, there's not really much that distinguishes these two. They are well separated from each other, so there's no way you're going to confuse them because they're completely different areas. A good place to see apiculatus is going to the Sun Highway in Glacier National Park, especially east of Logan Pass. There's a lot of them there. And subalpinus is up there at the ski resort there on Mount Hood. There's a lot of them there. You just drive up to the Timberline Lodge there, and you'll see them on the way up. Now we're going to the third subsection of the section Calochortus. It's nudie. There's only 4 species. Undulatus and Uniflorus are in the Bay Area. Uniflorus is pretty common up around Middletown and up in that area. Undulatus is a serpentine endemic. You have them on Ring Mountain in Marin County, and also in Oakland Hills, and there's some on Mount Diablo. Now, Calochortus nudus and minimus are in the Sierras and the Southern Cascades. Nudus, you see, is very common up around Mount Shasta and up in the Klamath Mountains there. And then you see there's some populations around Mount Lassen and in Nevada County and to the south. And the ways to really distinguish these, the main way is by the fruit. You see nudus has erect fruit and minimus has nodding. The fruit is nodding. Minimus is much smaller flower. It's actually the smallest of all the Calochortus, and the flowers are almost always white, and it's more from about Yosemite south. Now, if you look on these maps, it looks like, okay, in Nevada County and around Mount Lassen area, it looks like you have both of them growing together. But actually, you're not going to find 2 different species there. What's going on is that some people are calling them nudus, and some people are calling the same flowers minimus. The reason is because you see these ones on the top row, those were up in Nevada County. They're up east of Nevada City, up around Bear Valley. If you look at the fruit, they're nodding. That would indicate nudus. But the flowers are much smaller than the nudus to the north. They do have some color. They're not white like minimus, which, the nodding fruit would indicate minimus, but they're kind of, the flowers look more like nudus. So it's actually what you have is a kind of like a broad transition where the one species kind of transitions into the other. And so up there around Nevada County, they're kind of, it's not really clear what you should call them because they have characters of both. Once you get up around Wrights Lake area in El Dorado County there, the bottom row, those were taken up around Wrights Lake. Those are starting to look much more like minimus. They're much smaller, mostly white. They still have a little bit of color, but if you go down into the lower elevations on El Dorado County and Amador County, then they're more like these intermediate ones. They're not like the higher elevation white ones. Now we're going to the last subsection, Nitidi. I mentioned that this is kind of like a mixed bag of flowers that kind of don't really look like they fit with each other, all of them. There's actually some debate. If you look at the bottom ones there, those look more like cat's ears, but they're actually, they're not sure what section to put them in, the subsection, but at this time they're falling into the Nitidi subsection. Now, these are mostly not in California. The first 3, persistens, greenii, and longibarbatus, those are the only 3 species that are of this subsection that are found in California. Persistens is a California endemic. It's found up around Wairika. It's found basically at 2 locations only, on 2 mountaintops in that area. It's a serpentine endemic, and you see the petals on the upper left there, and some of the other photos they remain on the flower there. That's where it gets the name persistens. They persist until actually the fruit is fully grown. And in my opinion, this is one of the most beautiful Calochortus. It's really variable. The markings are variable. The color, it's a very beautiful flower. Greenii and longibarbatus on the top row, those are in California. Greenii is in the Shasta Valley up around Wairika. It grows in low elevations, however. Very hot, dry areas kind of to the northeast of Wairika. It does spill into Oregon a little bit in Jackson County. There's a place there just north of the border, exit 1. In fact, you can kind of drive just off I-5 and there's some up in there. And if you look at the outside of the petal, it looks like it's very similar to Longibarbatus, but actually the two are very different. If you look on the inside, the shots there, Greeny Eye has a yellow hair at the bottom. The entire petal on the inside is very hairy. Longibarbatus just has a few very long hairs. That's the name Longibarbatus, or long beard. But the hairs are very sparse, and it's a much smaller flower actually than Greeny Eye. It grows in a different habitat. It grows in fairly moist meadows at higher elevation. Greeny Eye is in like pretty much dry open areas there in the Shasta Valley. And Longibarbatus has one variety up in central Oregon. It grows up in a couple mountain ranges up there, and it's interesting because it's a triploid. It's unable to produce by seed, and it's very small. It just when I went to look for it, I had a hard time finding them because they're just slightly taller than the real short grass that they grow in. This one here, Lyalii, is a really interesting species. It's a fairly large plant. You know, they could be like 1.5 feet tall. The flower is kind of unusual. You see the sepals are really large, almost as big as the petals, and it almost looks like it would be a cat's ear, but you see there's very little or no hair on the petal. Just the margins are kind of fringed there. And these are in eastern Washington, and they just barely make it into British Columbia. You go up around Leavenworth and Chelan and up that area where you'll see those. The one on the bottom, Eurycarpus, is very widespread in the Intermountain area, northern Intermountain, eastern Oregon, southern Idaho. It grows over towards Yellowstone, and very common like north of Boise area. It's a very large, showy plant. The one on the left there, that's of extreme northeastern Oregon, a place called Hat Point, where you're overlooking the Snake River. That's the deepest canyon in the United States, 7,000 feet deep, a couple thousand feet deeper than the Grand Canyon. The mountains that you see on the other side there on the lower left, those are the Seven Devils Mountains in Idaho. And at this location here, if you go there in mid-July, there's literally millions of these flowers. They're just like fields of them. The year that I went was actually not a very good year, but you can see how many there were even on a bad year. And if you look on the map, there's one dot way, way down to the south in Nevada. Now this is, you know, a fairly moisture-loving plant. You know, you wonder like, what's it doing down there in Nevada? But that's actually accurate. Those are in the Ruby Mountains. Very disjunct population down there. And the Ruby Mountains are actually very green. It's surrounded by desert, but it gets actually quite a bit of rainfall there. They get around 40 inches of rain a year, and it's pretty well distributed, the rain. They get a lot more summer rain than they do in the Sierra Nevada. A lot of thunderstorms there in the summertime. And so you have a nice population there in the Ruby Mountains, right at the top of the Lamoille Canyon, which is very accessible. It's the only road that really takes you up into the high country in the Ruby Mountains. Oh. This one, Nitidus, is a fairly rare local endemic up in Idaho, kind of near the Washington border there. And they speculate that it came about as from a cross between Eurycarpus and Longibarbatus. The shape of the flower is like Longibarbatus, but it's much, much larger. It's a very large flower like Eurycarpus, and very, very beautiful flower. It looks almost like a globe lily, but it's not nodding. And when I was up there photographing them, I came across this one here. It was had 6 petals and 6 sepals. These are 3 endemics that are up in southwestern Oregon. Howlii comes very close to California. There's some, if you take the road from Happy Camp to O'Brien on the Oregon side there, before you get to O'Brien, there's a serpentine area there, and they're found in that area, and also along Highway 199 in a few places there. And the ones on the bottom there, those are up around Roseburg area, and it looks kind of similar to the Howlii, but they're actually pretty distinct. One of the differences, you see the fruit on Umquensis is nodding, while the Howlii has erect fruit. And Howlii is growing in very hot, dry areas. It's if you ever been up around Grants Pass and Medford, it gets really hot up there in the summertime. When I took these pictures, it was like 105 degrees. And Umquensis is a little further north. It's in a wetter area. And interestingly, it blooms earlier than Howlii. Howlii is like a late June bloomer. Umquensis is late May. And there's one population, the Flavicomas there, the variety. It's divided in 3 varieties, or basically 3 different populations that are slightly different from each other. The Flavicomas, those are growing up around 3,000 feet, so they do bloom later up there at that altitude. But you see that one has like the yellow hairs there. And then the one on the upper left, that's a very interesting species also. It's up there around Myrtle Creek, just south of Roseburg area, and it's growing on some strange soils, like iron soils up there, and serpentine. I think that one is growing in serpentine, but it kind of reminds me of persistence, and it looks kind of like a very large cat's ear. Now, if you want to see some of the species in this subsection, I'll give you a little tip here. There's a place on Highway 89 north of Burney, mile marker 4050, where you can see Longibarbatus. They're in a little meadow there right at that spot. It's a very convenient place to see it, because when I first looked for it, I was like way out in the middle of nowhere, way up in Modoc County, driving on 30 miles of dirt roads, that red volcanic dust, and I only found like 3 flowers. And then later I found out that they were right there on the side of Highway 89. And a route that I would take a lot of times going up to Mount Shasta area. And at that same spot, not all blooming at the same time, but there's a lot of amazing plants growing right there at that same spot. You have 2 species of fritillarias. You have Atropurpurea and recurva growing there. Also, Calochortus nudus is there. If you go a little further north towards Bartell, there's a lot more, but there are a few there at the mile marker 4050. Ron Parsons found some hybrids between Longibarbatus and nudus at that spot. So that's another interesting thing. And it's also one of the few places that you can see Erythronium chlamycensis. Another place is up above Castle Lake, but this place here is much more convenient, and they bloom much earlier there because you're only about 4,000 feet. And then you got some Brodea rosea growing there, which is not very common, Brodea to find. Only thing about this spot, last year I was driving by there, and they were thinning the forest along Highway 89, and right here in this spot, they were like, it was like, just happened to be the day I was driving by. They were driving bulldozers back and forth, like right where a lot of the bulbs were growing. I have nothing against thinning the forest if it's done, responsibly, but, they had no idea that it was a sensitive spot. And, they ended up just pushing up a bunch of the slash, going like way too deep, probably destroying a lot of the bulbs. And they were driving across the meadow, which I don't think they did too much damage there, but they did do some damage to some of the other bulbs. So I'm sure it'll be recovering, but it's kind of disappointing to see that. Now we're going to move to the section 2, Mariposa. These are your classic Mariposa lilies that, the big showy ones like luteus and superbus and vestae and venustus. And some of the distinguishing characters are the large campanulate erect flowers. They're never nodding. The fruit, like I was mentioning, is 3-angled, not 3-winged. They're very long, narrow capsules. And one thing that is very interesting about this section of Calochortus is that they close up at night. Or if it's like a dark, cloudy, rainy day, the flowers will be closed. So if you're planning on taking some photographs, then don't get there too early or too late, because you'll get flowers like the third one there that are mostly closed, and they're not going to make very good photographs. So it's better to photograph these ones in midday. The other sections of Mariposa don't do that. Like if you taking pictures of the cat's ears, you can go any time of the day and they'll be wide open. And the leaves are not sheathing. You don't have one big prominent leaf like you do in the section Calochortus. The leaves, like you see on the farthest photo on the right there, by the time the flower blooms, you hardly see the leaves. They're all withered and dried up. And the Mariposa is divided into 4 subsections. In fact, all 3 of the sections of Calochortus are divided into 4 subsections. And we're going to start with the subsection Venusti. And these are the very beautiful, showy Mariposa lilies. There's 15 species in this subsection, more than any of the subsections of any of the 3 sections of Calochortus. And they're mostly in California. The vast majority of the species are confined to California. They don't even go into Oregon. They just barely go into Nevada. And then there's one species that is in the Southern Rockies that's mostly outside of California. These are some of the other species. One of the species, the one at the lower right there, Monet Monantus, is extinct. It was collected in 1876 up by Wairika along the Shasta River in a serpentine area. And it was a very beautiful plant. You could tell by the pressed specimen there. It was a pink, large plant, and he found only 6 flowers. And that was the last time it was seen, 1876. The area up there is, it's been pretty much altered. The river has been altered, and they like made a channel. It's like an agricultural area. So people have gone up there looking for it, and there's no trace of it. That is a very interesting area for Calochortus. There's several local endemics like the persistens and the greeny eye are in that general area up there. So not surprising that there was another one. We're going to start with Calochortus superbus. It's pretty widespread throughout California, mostly surrounding the Central Valley up in the foothills. It's both in the Sierra Nevada and the Coast Range. They're usually white, especially the lower elevations. You get some of the higher elevation populations, you start seeing like more lavender ones, like up around Grass Valley and some of the areas up above Placerville. You see more of the lavender ones. And there's also yellow forms of it, which are usually overlooked because most people just conclude that it's luteus. But actually, if you look at the gland and the markings, they're actually yellow, yellow superbus. They're not luteus. This one, Telecordus Centrophus, this was described in 1993. It's one of the most recently described Calochortus. And it's when it was originally described, it was an area up along Highway 299 northeast of Reading, there up along the McLeod River drainage. And when it was described, they only knew of the white populations that were up in that area. But a few years ago, they discovered these yellow populations down in Tehama County, a little bit to the south. And it's the yellow ones are really actually really beautiful. And it's in a very isolated area. You have to go like long dirt roads to get to this spot. And it's pretty close to where the Dixie fire is blooming, but the last map I checked, it looked like it's probably not going to burn this area, which actually, if it did, it wouldn't hurt it. It would probably actually help it, because Calochortus, after a fire, they just go crazy and they're just blooming like everywhere. This is the only striped Calochortus. It's down in the desert there. You look in the map, it's kind of around Lancaster area. There's some around Lake Isabella in the Southern Sierra. It does make it into the valley, the southern tip of the San Joaquin Valley. And then there's another population down there in Nevada, down at the south end of the Spring Mountains, kind of near Las Vegas. And it's very beautiful species. The ones you see at the bottom there, that's a population, a very small population in Red Rock Canyon State Park in LA County. And that particular population is tetraploid. And they think that it may have originated from a cross between striatus and splendens. This is an interesting one. This is the one that I was mentioning that's mostly found outside of California. It's in Arizona, southern Utah, and it just enters California around in the Mojave, eastern Mojave, in the Death Valley area. And it makes it down into northern Mexico. And this is an interesting one because it's like a Mariposa lily on a vine. Flexulosus, it's very twining Mariposa lily. It's a very interesting species. These are some of the species down. Oh no, sorry. No, this is Venustus. This is Venustus is found from the Bay Area south, and then in the Sierra Nevada, it's from El Dorado County south, and then it makes it down into the LA area. And this is the most variable of all the Calochortus. Now, most of the flowers will have a lower and an upper petal blotch, like you see on some of the photos here, but it's not too reliable. You see a lot of the flowers do not have the upper petal blotch. Now, this species, like I mentioned, is the most variable of any Calochortus. Now, thinking back to the Calochortus albus, where you have the red ones down there in Monterey County that they're calling a variety, just because they're basically another color. Well, if you did that with Calochortus venustus, you'd have about 50 species, because Calochortus venustus comes in every color that you can imagine. If you took all the other colors of all the other species of Calochortus and put them together, that it would equal all those colors. And I'm going to just go through some slides here of some of the colors that you can come across. And the best colors are down at the high elevation, down in the southern Sierras and down around Mount Pinos, that area. When you get more to the north, like the Bay Area, they're mostly white, and even like in the southern Sierra at the lower elevations, they're mostly just white. But you get these high elevation populations that are just totally amazing. I mean, you got every color, every texture you can imagine are found. And sometimes they're all like in one single patch. These were taken down in southern Kern County. You see there, it's like you'll have one patch where you'll just have just like every color right there growing together. This area here, this particular area burned in the last year in the creek fire. I didn't get a chance to go down this year to see how they were blooming, but Ron Parsons went down and he said that they were really going crazy, even though it was a very dry year. But he went at the time that he usually goes, which is late June. And he said it was this year they were so early that he like pretty much missed the peak. But usually after a fire, they're good for several years. So if we get a wet year next year, it might be a really good year for it. Now, there's a little confusion sometimes identifying Superbus and Venustus. A lot of times they grow together in the same area, and north of the Bay Area you'll have Superbus and Veste, which is another large white, usually white or slightly lavender Mariposa lily. But it's really easy once you know what to look for. It's really easy to actually tell these three apart. You look at the glands, and now Superbus has a crescent-shaped gland. Veste has what they call a double gland, or actually it looks like an M. You see it there, it's like definitely M-shaped. And so that one is actually less common in the North Coast range than Superbus, but the way you can confirm which one you're looking at is just look at the gland. Venustus, a lot of times in the Sierras, is growing with Superbus, and you see the gland on that one is a really large square gland, nothing like the crescent-shaped gland of Superbus. So that's a very easy way to separate these three. These are some of the ones growing down in the San Luis Obispo area. It's kind of a hot spot there of diversity for this section of Mariposa. This one here, Calochortus splendens, it's really variable. It grows from the Bay Area down into northern Baja. The ones down in San Diego County, you see on the right, those a lot of people are now calling that Davidsonianus. It's not an officially recognized name, but you see the difference. That it has very short hair. The flower opens much wider. The anthers are purple instead of white, and you see it doesn't have that long hair like splendens has. Actually, I kind of agree with them that it's probably not the same species. It seems very distinct. And then when you get up north of the Bay Area, up on Walker Ridge there, you have ones that look more like the ones down in San Diego County. They don't look like splendens at all either. But they don't have the purple anthers, but they do have the short hair, like Davidsonianus. So that could be something. Some people are actually looking into those ones to see if maybe that should be another species or at least a variety. We're going now to the fourth subsection, or actually I think the third subsection, Macrocarpi. This one is just one species, Macrocarpus. It does have one variety, which is basically just a white form of Macrocarpus, which you have pale white ones in other areas, but up in eastern Washington, extreme southeastern Washington, you have a couple populations that are pretty much white, which some people are calling a variety. In California, these ones just barely come into California. That's mostly like up in eastern Oregon and Idaho. But you see they are growing up on Highway 97. If you go about 11 miles northeast of Weed, there's growing right along Highway 97 there in front of Mount Shasta. And this area just burned in the lava fire, they called it. The lightning caused fire that burned in June. So that actually next year might be a good year to go check those out. They bloom the end of June. Now this subsection here, Nataliani, are mostly desert bloomers. It's actually there's quite a few different species. There's 9 different species, and there are a few species in Southern California that are actually coastal, not desert. And what distinguishes this subsection are the circular depressed glands at the base of the petal, and they're surrounded by like a broad membrane. This is very distinct and quite different from the Manustes. And these are some of the species that grow down in and around the Owens Valley. The Brununus, we have those here where I live in Gardnerville. It's pretty widespread. It grows all the way up into Oregon. If you go up around Boise, Idaho, they're growing up there. Excavatus is a much more limited range. It's just down there in the Owens Valley in a few alkali areas down there. And then Kennedyi is another one that was taken down by Olancha. And you have Manantus, and then you have Monatensis, which is in the Death Valley area. Kennedyi is the only really red, bright orange colored Mariposa lily. And this was taken down there in Deep Springs Valley, which is east of the White Mountains. It was taken during the super bloom of 2017. I went there the year before, and I only found about 5 flowers at this spot. I went there this year, and there was not one single flower blooming, but 2017 and then again in 2019, there were 2 wet years. There was literally millions of them in the same spot where on a dry year, you will not find one single flower. Now, they do recognize one variety, Muntzii, which is the yellow ones that you see there in the upper right. But I kind of have a problem with that too, because as you see in the lower right there, like you have yellow ones and orange ones and red ones all growing together. Deep Springs Valley, you have like pretty much every shade from orange to yellow to red growing together. And you do have some populations that'll be all yellow, like there's some up in Death Valley that are all yellow. Arizona has some yellow populations, but then a lot of times you have a mix too. And what I really love about this species are the little curly leaves there. As they start to dry out, they curl up just about the time the flower is blooming. Calochortus clavatus is the exception to the rule here. These ones actually grow along the coast. The coast range there, you see San Luis Obispo, Monterey County, down into LA County. And you do have one variety up there in El Dorado County, which is kind of unusual because it's more like a Southern California thing. And then you got them growing up there around 5,000 feet in El Dorado County, which is kind of strange. There's 5 different varieties of clavatus, which is more than any other species actually of Mariposa lily. These are the ones up there in El Dorado County. So they look very much like the ones down in Southern California. It actually is a very large plant. These you see the one photograph there, they're like more than 2 feet tall. This is another spot here where you can see a lot of stuff growing at the same spot. This is Arroyo De La Cruz. Now, most of these endemic species down there, Arroyo De La Cruz, are on the Hearst property, and they guard that property very carefully. Not even Mike Vasey, they would let him in to look at the Arctostaphylos up there, even though he told them what he was, doing. And so there is one place where you can see a lot of the species without going on the Hearst property, and that's north, about 1.9 miles north of the Arroyo De La Cruz ridge. There's this little coastal plain there on the west side of Highway 1, which belongs to the state property. And you have the Calochortus clavatus recurvifolius, which is a real small variety of clavatus, which basically looks exactly like the other variety, the large one that grows just inland, but it's smaller, which if you're going to call it a variety, then you should call the luteus that are growing there a variety too, because they're the same size. They're little tiny things growing there all through that meadow. And you have actually 4 species of Calochortus. They don't all bloom at the same time, but you have 4 species growing on that little coastal plain there. You have uniflorus there. They bloom beginning of April. And then that's followed by the luteus, which bloom in May. Albus actually blooms very late there. It blooms like in June. And then the clavatus blooms at the end of June, beginning of July. You get some overlap. And you also have tons of Fritillaria bifolia there. If you go at the beginning of April, when the uniflorus are blooming, the Fritillaria will be blooming also. And you have Ceanothus maritimus. That's the only place that you can see it that's not on the Hearst property. Yeah, on the one photograph there, you can see them, they're blooming there on the lower right. And the last subsection is this Genusoniani. There's 2 species. They're actually very similar, very closely related. Ambiguous, it grows down in Arizona, kind of between Phoenix and Flagstaff area. And then the Genusonii grows pretty widespread throughout the Rockies, from way up there in Yellowstone all the way down to New Mexico. And there's one variety there, that kind of the pale yellow one, they call a variety Purpulcher, I guess how you say that. But that's another one that's kind of questionable. It's basically, some of them are white, just like the white Genusonii. And then you got on an adjacent mountain range, the yellow ones are in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. And then these purple ones are not named as a variety, which for me, they're even more different than the pale yellow ones. And those ones are over there by Los Alamos, up in the mountains there. Now we're going to go to the last section, Cyclobothra. These are mainly found in Mexico, except for one of the 4 subsections is found in California, the weedii, from the Bay Area down into northern Baja. But the other 3 are exclusively in Mexico. And it's interesting about the other 3, the last 3 subsections there. They have a different blooming period than the Calochortus in the north. They bloom in the fall and early winter. And actually, Weediani blooms the same time as all the other 2 sections there in the late spring and early summer, because they're actually in California and northern Baja, which has a different rainfall regime. The ones down in Mexico there, they get the monsoon rain down there, so it's dry in the wintertime. It's very dry, hardly rains at all. And the rain starts around June and rains through about September, and these things bloom in September, October. So it's kind of interesting. Here you see the distribution of the ones that are in Mexico. There's 18 species down there, which are not in the United States at all. We're going to start with the subsection Weediani. These are the ones that are in California. You have your Tiburonensis, which is the one there on Ring Mountain in the Bay Area. That's the northernmost of these ones. The rest of them are found down in Southern California and northern Baja. Weedy eye is mainly down there, Riverside and San Diego County. It's a very interesting species, quite large flower. And then you have 3 varieties of it. The one there in the middle, intermedius, they call it that because it's intermediate between weedy eye and plumber eye, which is also another very beautiful, showy species down there. And it grows along the coast there in Orange County. This is a plumber eye, and this is one of my favorites. It's very beautiful, really variable species down there in Southern California. You see the one in the upper left has a really fringed margin on the petal. They're not all like that, but some of them that I saw down there by Rancho Cucamonga were like that. And then one of my all-time favorite Calochortus photos is the one there in the lower left. That was looks like flames painted on the edge of the petal. That was down there in the Santa Monica Mountains. I was, this was 2019, they had a super bloom down there. And I was a little early. There was just starting to bloom, but there were some plants that had 30 or 40 buds on one plant. Ron Parsons went down there a couple weeks later and he got some amazing pictures of them. Calochortus fimbriatus is used to be considered a part of plumber eye, a variety of plumber eye actually, but it's actually quite distinct. You see the fimbriatus is for the hairs, the dense hair on the margin of the petal. Plumber eye doesn't have that at all. And these are found like up around Santa Barbara, up there at San Marcos Pass, up there above Santa Barbara. And this is the most bizarre Calochortus. This is a really close-up. It's actually a very small flower. Most people don't even realize that it's a Calochortus. It looks kind of like a star thistle or something. They can have, up to 40 or 50 flowers on one plant. And it grows in these serpentine areas down there around San Luis Obispo. You see the upper left there, the habitat where it grows. And it's just a really reduced petal there. It's hardly even see the petal. Now this is your Tiburonensis down there in Marin County. I'm sure you're all very familiar with it. You see in the upper right there was a yellow flower that appeared a couple of years ago. Ron Parsons saw it. He told me about it. Oh, you got to go take a look at this. So I drove down there and sure enough, it was a pure yellow flower. I don't know if it was an albino or what, but it was the only one like that. Now we're going to go down to Mexico now. Now from now on, these are not my photos. I haven't seen any of these species down there in Mexico. Ron Parsons took some of these photos, and others I got off iNaturalist. And so this was this first subsection here. I don't even want to attempt to pronounce that. If somebody wants to try, go ahead. But these are more like the typical Calochortus that we know in the north. I mean, if you would see these down there, you would probably realize that you were looking at a Calochortus. And these are more in mostly in northern Mexico, Chihuahua. They come actually pretty close to the United States, but they don't quite make it into the United States. Now this subsection Barbadi, now they're starting to look a little bit different down there. One of the things that for this section of Calochortus is you see on the lower right the fibrous coating on the bulbs. That's for the entire section there, including Tiburonensis and the weedy eye and all those. They all have that fibrous coat on the bulbs there. The one there on the upper left, Balensis, that's an amazing flower there. It's about the size of a like a softball or a tennis ball. Great big thing, and it's growing way down in the south in Oaxaca and Chiapas down there actually in like the subtropical wet forest down there. Not where you would expect to find a Mariposa lily at all. Now, remember at the beginning, I told you that there was a connection between Fritillaria and Calochortus. Well, here you go. These are a lot of these ones in this last subsection here. They look like Calochortus or like Fritillarias to me, except for the hair on the margins of the petal. If they didn't have that, you would think, oh, that's a Calochortus, that's a Fritillaria. And these ones here are very different from any of the other Calochortus. And actually, when they first classified them, they put them with the Fritillaria instead of Calochortus, and later they realized that they're actually Calochortus. Now, before I just wanted to show you some pictures of some hybrids. You get when you get two species growing together, occasionally you can find some interesting hybrids. These are in the same section of Calochortus. Actually, all the hybrids that I've ever come across are always in the same section. This is the Calochortus section, but there are two different subsections. You got the Pucelli with the elegante there. So you got it, and the hybrid is in the middle, kind of intermediate. And here's some more from the same area there. These are all hybrids. You can see some look more like Monophilus and some look more like Albus. So you kind of get some interesting outcomes there. This is an interesting hybrid that Ron Parsons found up on Mount Diablo. It's a hybrid between two rare Mariposa lilies, Umbellatus and Pucellis. Very interesting looking hybrid there. Here's a hybrid that it's not really that apparent. It's between Nudus and Tolmii. It was up in southwestern Oregon, but the way you could tell it was a hybrid is basically the size of the flower, and also it was covered with sparse hair, so kind of like right intermediate between the two. This is a hybrid in the middle there between Tolmii and Monophilus, and there's very few places where you have those two growing together. About the only place where they grow together is up in Shasta County, up there around Shingletown up there, and in Butte County, you have both of them growing together. You have that little disjunct population of Tolmii down there, and they're growing with Monophilus. And the hybrids were actually pretty easy to find because Tolmii is a larger flower than Monophilus. And so you would see these kind of large, pale yellow flowers, and then you would realize, okay, that's a hybrid there. You get, sometimes you get hybrids between Superbus and Luteus. They're kind of, usually they're like a real pale yellow flower like you see on the bottom. And down in the southern Sierras in the foothills, the Kern County and Tulare counties, you have this entire population of flowers that are intermediate between Luteus and Superbus. And you don't have any typical Superbus or Luteus there. They're like the entire population is kind of intermediate. So some people think that, well, maybe that should be described as a new species, and others like, well, no, it's just an intermediate zone there. So, but they're interesting flowers. This is one oddity here that I wanted to mention. This some lady posted this on iNaturalist in this year, and it was a very interesting flower. It's I don't know what it might be. It looks like almost like a Tolmii. It's branched like Tolmii, but it has no hair. The anthers are not like Tolmii. The anthers are like apiculate. You see there, very sharp pointed. she thought it was greeny eye, which I told her, no way, it's not greeny eye. It was blooming in April. Greeny eye blooms at the end of June in that same area. So it's definitely nothing to do with greeny eye. She told me where it was, and I went up there to the same spot, and all I found was Tolmii. So I don't know if this was just a fluke or something, but it has so many things that are different from Tolmii, which kind of really makes you wonder, well, could it really just be a mutant with no hair? But there's other things that are different about it too. So I went up there and I couldn't find it. When I went up there, it was a little early. They were just starting to bloom. So Ron Parsons went up there later, and when everything was in full bloom, and he couldn't find it either. All he saw was a bunch of Tolmii. So this is the latest Calochortus that was described, this Rusboldii. This was down by Santa Clarita, and it looks like it's intermediate between the strange Obispoensis and Plummeri. It's much larger than Obispoensis, but it's kind of got the same markings.
Oh, really?
So this thing, I kind of a little skeptical about it, because the person who discovered it said he was just digging up some bulbs in the fall. He saw some old dried out Calochortus and dug them up and found them in two different locations just by coincidence, the same way, about 20 miles apart. And nobody has ever seen these blooming in the wild. They've gone back to those spots. And we've had a couple of very wet years after this was discovered, and nobody has found one single plant in bloom. So I don't know. I'm a little skeptical. Some of the persons involved in it, where they grow Calochortus and hybridize Calochortus. So, but I don't know. It could be something that just very, very rare and only blooms after fire or something. But so far, nobody has seen this one in the wild. So anyway, that's all I got. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff. That is just amazing. I'm blown away both by the quality of your photographs and the diversity of the Calochortus, which I had no idea were as diverse in so many ways that you described. And
I had to really be selective, because there were so many other ones I could have included that I didn't even probably show 30% of them.
I mean, the amount of traveling you obviously had to do to get all these photographs. I would think you could write a book about your travels. You've gone to every corner of the state, it looks like, at multiple times. So I'm just really impressed with how much legwork was required to get these photographs. Just amazing.
I love to travel, but now I'm doing the buckwheats, which there's about 300 species. And
well, we'll look forward to that at a future date. With a couple of questions in the chat. One of them is, when are you finding these flowers in bloom? Now you've discussed that in large part. Are there any generalizations you can make about the bloom time?
Yeah, for the majority of the species, the best time is late May, early June. It varies a lot, with altitude and also the section Calochortus tends to bloom earlier, like the globe lilies and the cat's ears, they bloom earlier. They're more like April, May. And it depends, like the albus in the Sierra foothills, where it dries out much quicker than the coast. They bloom in April, but then albus on the coast, like down by San Luis Obispo, blooms like late May, June. So it all depends on which species you're looking for, and you kind of have to do a little research before you go looking for them to make sure your timing is right.
Another question is, how do you find the glands? Are they how obvious are they? What are the indicators of the glands on Calochortus?
Well, I showed that one photo there of the Superbus and the luteus, or the Venusti and Vestae, and they're pretty obvious. There's like usually down near the base of the petal on the inside. They're not hard to find. They usually have like hair around it.
And another question is, classifications are heavily based on gland shape, fruit shape, etc. Are DNA studies being done, and do they support the current classifications?
Yeah, I guess that's ongoing. That's something that usually ends up clarifying a lot of things in the end. But, like I was saying, a lot of classifications are just pretty much judgment, man-made judgment, and they're open to a lot of, different opinions. But like a lot of some of the species, they'll have two different color forms named as two different varieties, and then the others, you'll have like all these color forms and they're not named as varieties. So it's just kind of,
That's all the questions in the chat. If others have questions that they'd like to ask Jeff individually, you're free to unmute, and I appreciate if you'd use the reaction button to raise your hand so I can recognize you.
all the easy questions now. I'm not an expert.
Well, it doesn't look like we have additional questions.
Good.
So I just want to thank you once again, Jeff, for a superb presentation. I always learn so much from it. So before, it's close to 9 o'clock, before we leave tonight, let me just indicate that next month's program, which is on the second Monday of September, which is September 13th, we're going to have Dan Glusenkamp, the former executive director of State CNBS, talk about biodiversity, a subject of a lot of current focus. And Dan, I think, will have a lot to say about that. So we look forward to seeing you next month. And thanks again, Jeff, and thank you all for coming. And we'll hope to see you in September. Bye-bye.